Hello, everybody. Israel is now planning to kick out all of their African immigrants, while simultaneously, Australia seems to be wanting to open up the floodgates to African immigrants. Now, let me have a look, show you guys what I've been seeing and reporting on for the last many months that is happening in Australia. Here's a few examples of videos. Check this one out. These are the types of advertisements that we're seeing all across Australia right now. White girls as well. Thank you, Paco Rabanne, for hating on us, relieving us of all of our white women. So what's happening here is you have a white girl, which is supposed to represent Australia, and you have all these African advertisements of African men with white girls all across Australia, and I've documented at least 100 examples so far. Thank you, Hype. Target hates white dads too. Yeah, there's hardly any African migrants in Australia, yet they're dominating everything. As you can see here, white Australian men are forgotten. Asian Australian men have been forgotten. Yet they're focusing purely on the Africans. Excluded us. Clearly, sunglasses. All of the advertisements are like this across Australia. Actually, let me just... There we go. I'll just run it so that you can see it in silence. Politics. That's an African guy. There's hardly any... I don't think there's any Africans that were born in Australia. They're all migrants. And they have to be led into the country. There's even insulting advertisements like this. Let's go to this other one as well. As you can see, every advertisement across Australia is African now. Every single advertisement. And Australia has no, they can't get here by boat. We're so far away from Africa, it's ridiculous. That they have to be being let in. And so that means someone in the government is letting them in. I don't know one right-minded Australian that thinks that this is going to enrich their lives. It's only going to make it more dangerous for us. It's only going to make it more unsafe for us. It's going to... we're already struggling financially in this country because of the United States and China's trade war and how that's affecting our economy. I believe that this is an orchestrated plan by the governments. You also, if you want to have a look at who controls the media, who controls all of the social medias except for X, Twitter, they're all controlled by Israel. Now, we're being pumped with this, and if you were to criticize it, the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, will come after you. Now let's have a look at what's happening in Israel today.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that Israel is set to deport all African migrants, every single one of them.
So this is Paul Joseph Watson. Let's see what he has to say, and it's brand new, 14 hours ago.
Build another giant border wall to keep millions more out of the country. But wait, I thought diversity was a strength. The plan was revealed following violent clashes in Tel Aviv between different groups of Eritrean asylum seekers.
So this is coming to Australia. I'm already seeing the precursors of it already. And this is an orchestrated flooding of African immigrants into Australia. If you are not aware of this, if you're still focusing on the lockdowns, if you have influencers that you're following that want to tell you that Muslims are bad, they want to tell you, the cough and the vaccines, and don't get me wrong, some of these people have validity in what they're looking at. This is the number one threat to your future as an Australian. I promise you, in the future you'll look back and you'll realize, you'll ask, how did this happen? Where did it come from? This is the tipping point. If you're not sharing these videos, if you're not supporting me, if you are not telling your friends and sharing these around and talking about this and coming up with plans to try to stop it, your life is going to be an utter mess moving forward. And Israel knows that, so they're deporting them.
The running battles were fought between supporters and opponents of the Eritrean regime, leaving hundreds injured, including many Israelis. Swiftly,
the massive illegal infiltration into Israel from Africa posed a real threat to Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state.
But the massive infiltration of African migrants into Australia forced on us by our government that is being threatened by Israel and the United States to impose hundreds of thousands of African migrants and send them to our land, clearly is not going to oppress the Australians, real Australians, people who fought and died for this country, people who fought and died in support of the United States in the past. Their descendants, they're not going to be oppressed within their own country, but it's going to happen in Israel apparently, and the ADL is going to violently, through litigation, defend the rights of African migrants in Australia, while simultaneously protecting Israel's right to kick them out. You know what's going on here. Your future's in danger, and the only way that you can push back is to talk to the government. If you're not emailing them, if you're not calling them up, if you're not protesting out the front of your local politician's office, if you're not organizing yourself, you've got no future here. And it's orchestrated, people.
We stopped this threat by building the fence. There remains the problem of those who had already entered before the completion of the fence. These are tens of thousands of illegal infiltrators who entered Israel.
Wow, I thought diversity was our strength, and I thought that we should have a heart and let refugees into our country. Israel is far wealthier than Australia. Israel is one of the wealthiest countries on planet Earth. The amount of money and political power and military might that country has, Australia pales in comparison to that. We're just an outback, backwards country by comparison, yet we're supposed to take them?
Bibi, he previously attempted to, quote, relocate many refugees into Western nations over a period of 5 years. Yeah, thanks for that. But when that didn't work, Israel erected a giant fence along its border with Egypt. A measure that, according to Netanyahu, quote, thereby stopped more than 1 million infiltrators from Africa who would have destroyed our country. But wait, they told me it was cultural enrichment.
In Australia right now, as I'm uploading this video, there is so much pressure being put on our health system, our welfare state, our housing. So if it's becoming more expensive for you to go to the dentist, if it's becoming so expensive that you fear going to the doctor, if it is so expensive that you are struggling to pay rent to keep a roof over your head, this is why. And if you don't hit the streets now, or last year when I first started talking about this, or 2 years ago when it started happening, you have no future.
Now Netanyahu says Israel will put up another huge fence along the entire border with...
The funny thing is Australia has a moat. We don't need a fence. No one can get here, we're so far away. The people who run this country have been threatened by countries like Israel and the United States to forcibly send migrants like this to Australia. Not because they can't send them back to Africa, not because they're not fine wherever they came from. This is a strategy to destroy our sovereignty. And if you think about the United States, 350 million people, you know, how many people does it take to get to 10%? You know, let's just say there's like 35 million or whatever. Australia's population is 26 million. You get 120,000 people here, and you from Africa, and you can force political change within the country. That's why other countries like Israel have so much power within this country. That's why CCP members from China come here and have so much political power on arrival. And that's just taking it away from people like myself. And when I complain about it, then I not only have my rights taken from me, I not only have my ability to access healthcare, a roof over my damn head, political power to at least try to have a peaceful, safe life taken away from me. I am attacked in the fucking media by disgusting pieces of shit that want to genocide me and you if you look like me. This is a real genocide, people. This is real. This isn't a joke. This is really happening. And the same people who bitch and moan about how, oh, you're right-wing extremists. Well, you know what? Israel's right-wing because they protect themselves. But as soon as an Israeli arrives in Australia, what do? They become left-wing because they want access to your freebies. It's exactly the same as the Chinese Communist Party. You go to China, you can't own property, you can't vote, you can't get citizenship, you can live there for as long as you want. You will never be a Chinese. That's right wing, isn't it? Protecting themselves, right? But as soon as Chinese arrive in Australia, they become extreme left wing. They say, hey, you're racist, give me some freebies. Because that's how it works. If I went over to Israel, I'd become left wing. I'll be like, oh, well, what about the freebies? Can I have some freebies too? Can I have some free healthcare? Yeah, that's how it is. And they'll go, why don't you go back to Australia? Oh, it's because you destroyed my country and now I'm a refugee from my country. I've got to come to Israel to try and get a job. This is how it works. You destroy all of the other... And then we go into geopolitics, which is probably over the heads of most of the people out there. But that's the strategy that's happening here. Destroying all the allies of the United States so that all of the wealth, all of the proper human capital will go back to the United States. There's a massive reset happening. Globalization is over now. And instead of protecting ourselves, we are now destroying ourselves. I doubt the proper Australian politicians are asking for this. I think they're being threatened into it. I don't think any Australian politician would think that this is a good idea, because this is going to destroy our healthcare. Our entire health system is going to collapse under the weight of not only useless migrants, but also the fact that they're going to bring so much violence that it's going to put extra pressure on the emergency wards of every hospital in Australia. And you've got the option now of going to your politicians and saying, stop this insanity. But you're not going to. Because, the ADL tells you that's racist.
Jordan, to ensure, quote, that there will be no infiltration from there either. We will protect our borders and we will protect our country. Interesting. No.
The irony.
How he's not just calling for the deportation of those who took part in the riots, but for, quote, the removal of all the other illegal infiltrators, which Israel treats as illegal economic migrants, not refugees. The development has... Netanyahu's mass deportation plan is the ADL, which previously asserted that, quote, it is unrealistic and unacceptable to expect the state of Israel to voluntarily subvert its own sovereign existence and national identity and become a vulnerable minority within what was once its own territory.
Exactly, and that's what's happening to you if you're a white Australian. If you have relatives that fought and died for this country, if you're an Aboriginal Australian and you're wondering where this whole voice vote came from, they're all connected. Now, it is unrealistic and unacceptable to expect the state of Israel to voluntarily subvert its own sovereignty. That's exactly what they're doing to us here in Australia. And the fact that you guys aren't rioting in the streets yourselves, you're not arming yourselves and going on mass burnings of cars down the streets and accosting your politicians at Woolworths and Coles and letting them know how you feel, means that we're just going to wait until it happens to us. You do know that Australia had the strictest lockdowns of any other country on planet Earth. We locked down tighter than the Soviet Union because you guys don't do shit. It's your fault.
Territory. Diversity for thee, but not for me. Calling for demographic stability and national identity to be protected in Europe is hate speech. Calling for demographic stability and national identity to be protected in Israel is a progressive virtue. Tucker Carlson repeatedly pointed out this glaring inconsistency when he was on Fox News.
Go to the Anti-Defamation League's website sometime if you'd like a glimpse of what an unvarnished conversation about a country's national interest might look like. In a short essay posted to the site, the ADL explains why the State of Israel should not allow more Arabs to become citizens with voting rights. Quote, with historically high birth rates among the Palestinians and a possible influx of Palestinian refugees and their descendants now living around the world, the ADL explains, Jews would quickly become a minority within a binational.
And this has nothing to do with religion, race, anything like that. It's about you as an Australian protecting your rights, because they will be taken away from you. And there comes a point where there hits a critical mass of invaders, colonizers in our country, where we totally lose all of our rights and we give the power to the invaders. And there's a possibility that those invaders could misuse that power to create a genocide in Australia and murder you and me. And you might think that that is outrageous, but we have countries like China that are building military bases on our doorstep in the South China Sea with the direct, the explicit reason for these military bases off the coast of Australia is to blockade us whenever they want. The South China Sea military bases, the islands, that's what they're designed for. It is to cut off trade. It's not about the fish, it's not about the oil, or maybe it is partially, but it is mostly to tell countries like Australia that if we don't do what they tell us to, or they just have an issue with us, they can shut us off at any moment. Now imagine if we get shut off, or our international trade gets shut off, which is going to happen. It is eventually going to happen. There's going to be some strife in the South China Sea eventually. And we have to have a peaceful society to try and get through some hard times while we are flooded with people who don't see the way that we do. And they're running around stealing and creating more and more violence in our country. Well, we become Venezuela, don't we? And who does that benefit? We become Venezuela, then the superpower in the region can access all of our resources. Huh? But the thing is, what I'm seeing right now is this isn't China flooding us with Africans. It is our friend. It's our friend, the United States, that is flooding us. Because maybe our so-called friend wants to subjugate you and steal the wealth out of Australia, because they're in fact our enemy now. They're the enemy of everybody, actually. It's a disgusting country. Let's see what the so this is Al Jazeera, and this is 5 years ago. They've been talking about African migrants in Israel.
Hasn't done so. We definitely say that not every Sudanese or Eritrean deserves the status of refugee, but the issue here is that out of 40,000 of them, only 10 have been recognized as refugees.
40,000 African migrants have applied for refugee status in Israel, and only 4 or 5 have been allowed to stay. Now, in Australia, we used to do that. We no longer do that. Apparently, the floodgates have not only opened, but as I reported here, every advertisement in Australia is now promoting Africans in our country. And when I write here, Australian men face genocide, well, I guess you're going to find out the hard way, because I don't see any of you guys rioting out the front of your local politician's office, do I?
Israel's Prime Minister defines the rest as illegal infiltrators. His reported deal with the...
Yeah, they're illegal infiltrators. They define them as illegal infiltrators because Israel doesn't want them there. This is the BBC about 24 hours ago.
Considering deporting Eritrean asylum seekers who were involved in violent protests on Saturday. Around 160 people were...
The massive illegal infiltration into Israel from Africa posed a real threat to Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state.
See, I wish I lived in a country like this that was run by the same people as me, that protected my rights, my freedoms, my access to healthcare, my access to food, my access to a roof over my head, protected the borders so that I am safe. But that is not always the case. And some countries, and this is why there's been so much death and destruction throughout the world, is because when other countries can control your country and control your borders, they can destroy your country, literally have genocides happening all around the world, which they're planning for Australia, and in the future then come back and take everything that you built. And that's what they're trying to do here. Israel has the ability to protect themselves, and they don't care what you think. In the past, Australians used to say the same thing. We don't care what you think. We're going to protect ourselves. But now, the media, everyone, mainstream media, every advertiser in Australia, even UGG boots, Bonds, all of these Australian brands are now working for your enemy to flood you with enemy combatants, colonizers, that are going to destroy your economy and eventually turn us into Venezuela or something along those lines, so that countries like maybe China, but most probably the United States, can exploit our natural resources off the blood of white men like myself and you watching this as well. This is not a joke. You are going to suffer the consequences of this, and this is not a conspiracy theory, because I don't deal in conspiracy theories. I only deal with fucking facts. This is going to happen.
We stopped this threat by building the fence. There remains the problem of those who had already entered before the completion of the fence. These are tens of thousands of illegal infiltrators who entered Israel.
Israel protects their borders. We don't.
Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu called for the immediate deportation.
African news. Well, it looks like cultural enrichment is doing okay over there. Look at this ridiculous crap.
Of Eritrean migrants involved in Saturday's violent clashes in Tel Aviv.
It's funny how sometimes there's a few comments from fools when I upload these videos, making outrageous associations. It's almost like, oh, well, you're just jealous. Or some weird thing. Or why don't you become a model for one of these companies, like some other fool in the last video. This is a serious threat, and imagine if that person, I believe those people are enemies of this state, but imagine if you are an Australian that thinks that this is going to end well. How low must your IQ be?
He held a meeting to discuss measures against those who participated, referring to them as illegal infiltrators. The state. What happened yesterday crossed the red line. It's a riot. It's bloodshed. These are riots we cannot accept. Therefore, the first thing I do is to wish recovery to the police officers who were injured during the attempts to restore order.
Imagine that. Imagine living in Israel, a country that protects the border and protects their own people. I wish I lived in a country like that. I wish I didn't live in a country where our own politicians are the enemy of our own freedoms. And what I predict is going to happen is the Africans that have arrived here are going to create this much violence. This much violence is going to trigger fear amongst the Australian population. The Australian population will then turn to the government to protect you. The government will step in and say, fear not, we will protect you. You just need to give us more power, like you guys did during the lockdowns. And to protect us from the African migrants that the government planned for, they sent them here. The government posted advertisements of Africans everywhere with smiley faces, and then 10 years later they're rioting in the streets and murdering and raping your daughter, and the economy is a total shambles because they let in the wrong ones. I noticed that there's some African migrants on George Street right now that cannot speak very good English. They're uneducated. They clearly have insane mental problems. They're letting in people with mental problems, and they're homeless already on arrival. They've been given citizenship. Oh, come on in. You're now an Australian. There you go. And then they're walking up and down George Street begging right now. That person, those people were brought into the country by your politicians. That is going to end in extreme violence caused by them, not you. And then you're going to turn to the government. The government's going to come out and say, we will save you. Just give us all of your rights. Then Australia will become a dictatorship like Venezuela. The economy will collapse in ways that you cannot imagine. And then a foreign power like the United States will manipulate this country the same way they did with Venezuela. And you won't have any freedoms left. And the dreams of what Australia once was will totally disappear. And if you're saving to give your children a good old future, I promise you your children do not have a future. And there's a very good chance that you're not taking this seriously, so you deserve to have your retirement ruined and your children's lives ruined, because you are the problem, because you don't... There's too many stupid Australians. Fuck this. I'm ending it here.